On today's post, we are talking about what your rights are and what the law says about going to the voting polls while armed. Hello everyone, my name is Joseph Radzwion IV, your trusted attorney with Radzwion Law, PLLC. And with me today is a very special guest and friend of mine, Terry Johnson. For those of you who don't know Terry, Terry is a licensed attorney here in the state of Michigan. He's one of Michigan's best criminal defense lawyers. He is also regularly consulted and hired by pro-Second Amendment groups here in the state that fight for and defend your Second Amendment rights. Terry also was one of the lawyers on the team of lawyers that helped block the Secretary of State's unlawful ban on firearms last election cycle at the polls. We're going to talk a little bit about that case here at the end, so stick around for that. And welcome, Terry.
Thank you for having me, and I appreciate the kind words, and I promise you I'll get you the $20 I owe you when this is over, so thank you.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. So I figured we can talk a little bit about some of the most common questions that I get at my firm when it comes to carrying a firearm and voting, and really we can look at the three big areas in Michigan, which would be school or school property, churches or other worship centers, and then also like a community college, because those are the places people are most commonly going to vote at, right?
Correct.
So the question is posed to the, something to the effect of, how can I carry at a poll when it's governed under the concealed carry free zone, or the MCL 28.4250 on the back of my CPL? How can I carry there? What is the law?
So that's a great question. First of all, let me start by saying, if you do not have a concealed pistol license, okay, that's number one, you can't go onto school property, period, okay? And we'll talk, I'm sure, about open carry later, but I want to make sure everybody understands that. First of all, if you have a concealed pistol license, strike that. If you don't have a concealed pistol license, this does not apply to you. We're talking to the people who have concealed pistol licenses. And if you have a concealed pistol license and you go in certain places, and for example, let's say a church, okay? You go into a church and it is a pistol-free zone, correct? Yes. According to the statute.
Right.
You go into a pistol-free zone, again, this situation of church, and you can't conceal carry unless you have permission of the presiding officer, the pastor, whoever the highest official is at your particular church or mosque or temple. And if you don't have permission to carry concealed, you can carry open there. Now, the interesting thing is, because it's private property, they can ask you to leave. And they would be within their rights to do so. If you fail to do so, then you're trespassing. So we're going to take that scenario and kind of bring it back home to a situation that you're talking about. Some churches are actually voting places, right?
Correct.
So if I want to go into a church and I don't have permission of that particular church or the authority to carry there, I can open carry while I am voting, and I will be within my rights. And you can do that just about everywhere, with the exception of schools. And schools is one of the gray areas that still hasn't been resolved.
That's right.
As you know, two very good friends of mine, Attorney Dean Greenblatt and Attorney Jim Mikowski, brought some cases before the Michigan Supreme Court a few years back, and they did a very good job, but we still don't have an accurate definition of whether or not a school can stop you from open carrying or not. So a lot of schools have put in place policies, notice I said policies, not laws, that prohibit firearms on the school property if you're open carrying. So if you're at a school, I'd be very, very cautious about going out there and attempting to carry openly.
Coming back, kind of just to summarize those three areas, the school property, the church, or the community college, university, these are all areas that the law says a CPL holder cannot carry a concealed pistol on by law. There are exceptions, right? If you have permission like you're talking about, or you are open carrying.
With the CPL.
With the CPL, correct. If you are going to vote in one of these places and be lawful while you're carrying, number one, you have to have a CPL.
Correct.
And number two, you have to open carry. And number three is if there's a policy and someone asks you to leave, you better follow that request.
Correct. And again, that's because this is on private property at the time. So definitely follow that. That is not the time and place to have that argument. Again, get a hold of this fine attorney here. He's really good. And, if you run into some issues or something along those lines. But for the most part, don't have that fight on that property with the police or with the poll workers, because then it doesn't become an issue of your firearm. It becomes an issue of disturbing the peace, and believe it or not, or disorderly conduct. Those are things that can actually stop you from having a CPL for 8 years.
Right.
So you really need to be careful.
Yeah, and I will have linked in the description or somewhere in this video, the video I posted a while back on the do's and don'ts of open carry. It's titled, "What is Open Carry?" where I give a good demonstration of how the pistol has to be carried in the holster, what is and isn't allowed for situations like this. So you can check that out. But let's move on to another question, that what if I don't have a CPL? Can I open carry into these polling locations anyways? And I think you kind of already hit on that we have to have a CPL in order to go into these 3 places that we're talking about. Absolutely,
and let's just be extremely clear. The answer to the question is no. Everybody say it with me.
No.
What a lot of people don't understand is people believe open carry is a solution to concealed carry, and it's not. And what do I mean by that? If you are open carrying without a concealed pistol license, you have more restrictions on you than you do with a concealed pistol license.
All right, so let's look at another question that is posed, and it goes something like this. Can a city ban me from open carry or even concealed carry in places like City Hall, a city rec center, a fire department, or even a county park or county building, city park, while I'm voting?
The answer to that is no, they cannot. Michigan has what's called a preemption law, and I know you're very familiar with that. And what that basically says is the only entity in the state that can determine what areas firearms can and cannot be in is left to the state. So the city of Warren, hypothetically, cannot tell you can't open carry in a park. They cannot do that. They cannot designate places due to Michigan's what we call preemption law. So that's a really good thing to have.
Yeah, and anyone that's followed our post or our blog for any period of time knows that we've put out videos where I personally contact county boards and everything, or the county manager to say, hey, you have a park that says I can't have a firearm here, or a campground. This is not enforceable. Please remove it from your ordinances or whatever. So we viewers are somewhat familiar with that state preemption. That's MCL 123.1102. So let's look at let's talk a little bit now, for those of you who have stuck around until the end here. What about the court case that went on last voting cycle, where the Secretary of State decided in their infinite wisdom that they could decree over the citizenry that we could not bring or carry a firearm openly to the voting polls? What happened with that? How were you involved?
I was part of a great team of lawyers. I mean, hats off to all of them. Really don't want to mention names. I'm going to mention a few, but I hope I don't miss anyone out of this, because there are quite a few great 2A lawyers who are involved with this. Steve Doolin was part of this, Dean Greenblatt. We also had Jim Mikowski. We also had great help from the gun organizations, Michigan Open Carry, Michigan Gun Owners, which is MGO, Michigan Coalition of Responsible Gun Owners. Here in Michigan, you have really phenomenal gun groups that will come together on issues like this, which they did. In that particular case, the Secretary of State at the time, Jocelyn Benson, decided no guns at the polls because it scares people. But what we basically did after she came out with that decree, the 2A attorneys, as we're called, we got together. We filed a lawsuit, stopping this in the Court of Claims. We actually won that. So people were able to go to the polls and vote, and open carry, as you have been talking about, or concealed if they were exempt.
Right. Now, for those of you who may be wondering, well, what happens when or if the Secretary of State decides to wait until the last minute again and say, hey, you guys are going to go out and vote, we don't want guns at the polls. Here's a round two of what happened in 2020.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if this Secretary of State did this again. But however, let me give all of you a bit of common sense advice, I'm going to call it at this point. There's a time to fight certain things, and that time to fight is in the court system, not on the actual place where the event is going. So let me give you an example. If you're driving down, let's say, one of the major freeways, and you get pulled over, and let's say you were doing 55 and the police officer writes you for like 70, and you're like, I wasn't doing 70, right? You're not going to fight that ticket right there because it's not going to turn out good for you. You're going to engage an attorney or go to court yourself, and you're going to follow certain procedures. This would be the exact same thing that we would recommend if something were to come up and someone were to tell you, you can't open carry here, or ask you to leave. The best advice we could give you would be leave and let us know. And that way we can start the proper process of going down the road.
Okay, so I think that concludes our segment here on voting while armed, and thanks for watching. If you support the Second Amendment and Second Amendment rights, hit that like button, share this video, and consider subscribing. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.